total assets of the systems combined are approximately $15 billion. The teacher system itself is kind of a companion system. We actually work out of the same building here in Atlanta, and they're about $50 or so billion in assets. But ERS administers the public schools retirement system, the Georgia military retirement system. Those two systems actually receive state funding from the state of Georgia. The other systems operate out of the income from the investments of the systems themselves. The mission of ERS is to be a premier retirement system. One example of that is a new pension administration system that we're implementing over the next couple years. A lot of the budget you'll see in computers relates to that computer system development. Also, customer service is a primary area of focus for ERS in terms of serving the membership with accurate information, timely service, making sure that we do the very best job we can for the members and the retirees of the systems. As far as the budget is concerned, as I mentioned, Employees Retirement System of Georgia receives Georgia funds primarily to the Georgia Military Pension Fund, and that's determined. It's actually determined by the actuary. So the funding that the military system needs every year is determined by our state actuary, and what he does is determine what exactly is required in order to keep that fund moving towards full funding over time. The second system where we receive public funds is the Public School Employees Retirement System. That system, like I said, is the second largest system that we manage, and the state funding there is a little more than $4 million each year, and that funding is required in order to pay the current level of benefits to public school employees other than teachers. So that relates primarily to cafeteria workers, bus drivers, custodians, folks in those jobs. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have. Like I said, most of the other spending that's in our budget is generated from the investment income of the systems.
Any questions from the subcommittee? And so the total funds for ERS is, based on this, is 28 million. Is that right?
That's the total spending of the funds for this fiscal year. Correct.
And those would be things that that's for your office, for your agency, that covers everything like that, and benefits for current employees who are not yet receiving retirement benefits.
Right? It's to run those offices, to run the investment programs that are in place, to operate the Peach State Reserves program. So it's all the administration to run and administer those benefits.
How many employees does your agency have?
We have approximately 100.
Any questions?
I do.
Okay. Representative Smith?
Could you explain how this system works for an employee, say a cafeteria worker or a school bus driver? Because we constantly get asked by them if there's any way to raise a percentage of what they receive. So how is that determined? Because when we get those questions, I'm not sure I myself understand exactly how it works.
Thank you. I'll be happy to answer that.
Thank
The
you.
public school system, again, is there as a supplemental benefit plan. Most of those folks, years ago, were part-time employees. They'd have bus routes, for example, in the morning, and then come back maybe in the afternoon. The cafeteria workers would serve during the middle part of the day, but again, they were part-time jobs. So the benefits were constructed with that in mind. So they're members of Social Security, so they pay into Social Security.
Okay.
And then they receive the monthly benefit, which at today's funding is $13.50 for every year of service. and they get some cost of living increases along the way once retired. They can become eligible for retirement at age 65 with a minimum of 10 years of service. I think what's very important for you to note, too, is that the members contribute only $4 per month for this benefit.
So they do 4, and their match is $13.50.
Well, again, it's for every year of service. When they retire, they get $13.50 for every month of that service. So you can't compare 4 to $13.50, but rather, let's say if they worked a year times 4, they'd contribute $48 a year if they were 12-month-a-year employees. So if they only contribute $48 a year, what they're actually receiving in retirement is $13.50 every month for every year of service. So their return on investment is very high for only contributing $4 per month.
Okay, so they just do $4 a month. The initiatives, as legislators, we receive communications almost annually about the need to increase. They're wanting to increase the state's portion of what we're doing, and so then you run actuarial numbers on that to show what would happen to the system. I guess, is it understood by people that they also receive Social Security benefits and others do not, or don't most of our employees also have Social Security benefits? So that makes that question moot, right?
It does, except that if they only tell you what they're receiving, and then they don't couple that with what the Social Security benefit might be in addition to that, then it might be moot. Otherwise, you might ask them to compare what their total benefits might be, including Social Security.
Okay. All right.
For example. As far as going forward, what could be considered by the legislature is an improvement in benefits, but then there'd have to be likewise funding and probably a higher contribution from the employees themselves. And what you might consider is whether full-time employees would only benefit from this change, or whether you want to also give this probably a large benefit increase to the part-time employees. Again, you may end up having different levels of benefits depending upon how many hours per day or how many days a week or weeks per year they work.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Representative Black.
Let me take serious issue with you on the statement that they received Social Security. Back in the 80s, there was a provision that allowed local school systems to opt out of Social Security. And a number, and I think you will find it's a majority of the school systems in the state of Georgia do not pay Social Security on these employees. And we are, and these employees are not going to be able to draw Social Security unless they have worked at other jobs long enough to create the 40 quarters of eligibility in Social Security. And this started, I believe, in the early 80s, but sometime at the point. But we are approaching the threshold when we're going to have people retire from having worked with the school system for 35 or 40 years. And the only retirement benefits they're going to have is this $13.50 a month. And I think this is a calamity, folks, waiting to happen. This is something that I fought on when I was on the school board. I've worked on the retirement committee for a couple of years. And, folks, this is hanging over our head.
Thank you, Representative Black. Did you have a question in addition to your comment? No, okay. Appreciate it. Thank you. Yes. Representative Hurd.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I may, I would like to ask the gentleman to just go through the items under the 06 budget and the expenditures and just give us a brief explanation of each of those headings from personnel service through public employment retirement system.
I'm not sure which document you have, but
I'm looking at page 56 in the little budget.
Okay. I think look at the governor's. Okay, what you have.
The personnel services category includes salaries and benefits, including the insurance for workers' compensation and health insurance. The equipment cost, I'm sorry, looking below that, the computer charges is the next largest category. I mentioned earlier that one of the key goals of ERS is to improve member services, customer services over time, and we're implementing a new computer system. The teacher system implemented a similar system several years ago, and we've utilized the same vendor and contracted with them to do something similar for ERS and all 9 of its systems as well. That's what contributes to a large extent in that $8 million number for 2006. The contracts category, that's primarily the fees that ERS pays to offset its share of investment services managed by the Division of Investment Services, shared between ERS and TRS, as well as the accounting services ERS receives, again sharing those costs between ERS and TRS. The per diem and fees category represents, for the most part, the actuarial cost that ERS pays for, again, studies of all the bills that we have in place, as well as the auditor fees, again, audited every year, all of our systems by KPMG under the current contract. The last 2 categories for Georgia Military and Public Employees Retirement System, those are dollars that are actuarially determined, again, by our actuary. Those are funded from the state, and those go directly into the retirement systems to help fund the benefits. On all of page 56, out of that total $28 million, it's the $5 million, 112, 647 that come from the state, and again, those are the two categories: the one for Georgia Military and the other for Public Employees, Public Schools Retirement System.
Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
So the benefits paid out actually come out of the personal services, the $6.2 million?
The $6.2 million is the staff costs in administering the retirement systems. The benefits themselves, for example, the benefits that ERS pays annually are over $800 million a year. So those are not administrative costs of the system. Those would be the retirement benefits of the system. And those are not included in this budget.
And you said before that you have a staff of 100.
Yes, sir.
Got further questions?
Well, this on the real estate rentals, this $575,000. That's money that goes to the Georgia Building Authority on rentals?
Actually, ERS and TRS own the building that they operate in. It's one of the investments in the portfolio. So we pay our fair share of rent into that so that we can, it's a market share of rent so that there can be a return on that investment in the investment portfolio itself.
How many square feet do you have?
I'm going to turn to my CFO and see if he can help me.
I honestly can't recall the number of square feet, but we are paying $15 a square feet for that space.
You got to the chase. Thank you.
Any further questions? Apparently no further questions at this time. I'll ask you this. Our subcommittee, as with the other subcommittees, we want to, we appreciate the governor's recommendations, but we hope to, improve on the budget, improve upon his recommendations, and we want to do that by trying to save the taxpayers money. So I'll ask you the same thing I'll ask every other agency. Do you have anything that you could identify to us, whether it's $10,000 or whatever that we could shave from your budget request, that you could identify to us without us having to go in and try to identify amongst ourselves?
For the 07 budget?
Yeah, well, we're looking at either one, but we're looking at 06 right
What I can tell you, sir, is that even though we have 110 positions in ERS approved, we have, when we've had people leave, we've not replaced several people. And so that's one way that ERS is, making sure that when we do hire people, we're hiring when we need them and not just because we have an opening. The other thing we're doing is because we're running this new pension administration system, we want to make sure that we don't hire people for the needs today, but we make sure that we're, when that system is up and ready, that we actually fill any vacancies or shift current people to areas that we know we need them.
Right. And we're not saying that we're going to cut anything in the governor's recommendation. I just wanted to ask if there was anything that you could identify. And I mean, it might be through the process that we do, but I mean, we're not saying we're going to, but I just wanted to find out if there's anything you could offer up, identify to us. I don't think there are any further questions. Yes, I do have another question. Okay.
And this is just a curiosity question. I'm looking at the 07 budget, which tracks back expenditures in 04, 05, 06, and proposed 07, which is page 156 of the 07 budget. Okay?
Yes.
In particularly under travel, I see 15,000 in 04. I see 10,000 in 05. Then it jumps tremendously to 72 in 06 and 73 in 07. What happened?
I think the budget number represents the potential travel that the board members as well as staff may take from time to time to educational conferences. But what I'd like to do is double check what our actual expenditures have been. And I do see that number being $72,000 even in 2006. But if you wouldn't mind, I'd like to double check that number and then get back to you with that.
And also following up in the same comparison on the contracts made a tremendous jump also in the same time frames.
Well, under the contracts, that's primarily for, again, services received from the Division of Investment Services, as well as contracts for that new computer system that we discussed, and that is a new project for ERS. Pardon me, just one moment. It's good to have reliable people on your staff attend along with you. Steve reminded me that the primary increase for the travel, it wasn't at all for any trustee or staff travel for education. It was, and you might recall that mid-year last year that the deferred compensation programs were transferred from the Georgia Merit System to ERS so that together ERS could combine retirement education for 401k, 403b, the 457 plans, as well as the defined benefit plans that we administer. The main increase in travel is to, again, it relates to our customer service initiative, and that's to help and get out to more parts of the state of Georgia other than Atlanta, where we primarily have our educational sessions for retirees and actives, but get out to other parts of the state, and there is additional travel costs in order to reach more people.
So you all are picking up the educational responsibilities that was previously carried by
The Georgia Merit System.
So we hopefully we'll see a swap off back towards the merit system.
Well, I think what had happened in the past is that was not being done at GMS, and so I'm not sure you're going to see a savings there. You're going to see an improvement in service.
New service. Okay, thanks.
Yes.
Any further questions? Thank you, sir. Appreciate you
welcome.
coming today. I think next we have the Department of Revenue. If you would introduce yourself to the committee, subcommittee, and tell us about your department, what its mission is, what you do for the state, what you do for the taxpayers of the state, and we would like to also hear background. Since it's been about a year, I know you wanted this last year to a certain extent, but we want to hear about the homeowners tax relief grants and how that's affecting the request that you all have, and that there's movements of monies and things like that.
Sure. My name is Bart Graham. I'm the Commissioner of Revenue, and with me today are Dee Langley, our Acting Budget Director, J.D. Grant, who is a direct report of mine that Dee reports to, Ed Maney, who runs our Compliance Division, and Mac Chandler, all of whom have operating responsibility in the department. The primary mission of the department is the registration, compliance, enforcement, and administration of all tax laws in Georgia, except for the insurance premium tax. We collect roughly $15 billion a year in revenue, tax revenues. We are also responsible for the alcohol and tobacco law enforcement function, as well as the motor vehicle tag, title, and registration function. We have approximately 1,900 part-time and full-time employees, of which about 1,100 are full-time employees. The others are used on a seasonal basis primarily. As it relates to the Homestead Relief Grant, last year legislation was passed to curtail the use of special tax districts, or the creation of special tax districts. That was fueling some of the growth in the Homestead Relief Grant funding over the years. Because we, in that legislation, stopped the creation of special tax districts, the estimate for last year came in well under what was in the original budget and the amended budget by the scope of $20 million. $10 million of that, I think, is what the governor's recommending, or $9 million of that is what the governor's recommending help fund some of our technology challenges that are formula-based driven expenses coming from the Georgia Technology Authority.
Go ahead, if you would. Thank you. If you go ahead at this time and go through the request, and I'm sure we'll have questions after that. But if you go ahead and go through the budget request, I'd appreciate it.
Okay. Well, the spirit of the budget request is that we aren't asking for any new positions or funding for positions. We're not asking for any new hardware other than some minor things in the motor vehicle division where we've found some gaps once we inherited that function. The thrust of our ask is to properly fund the growth in Georgia of new taxpayers and additional tax returns being filed in the compliance initiative that we've been after for the last 24 months, which is, as we reported earlier, has yielded $190 million or more tax revenue to the state over the 2-year period. That growth in taxpayer base and the growth in our compliance initiatives has caused our GTA billing to increase substantially, and that's what we're asking to be funded in this request. Now, over the last 2 years, we've renegotiated every one of our lease agreements, including our headquarters agreement, which yielded a $1.6 million reduction that we reported last year in lease payments over a 5-year period of time. We've also moved some facilities in overbuilt markets where there was excess capacity in order to get our lease rates down, and we've closed one customer service center in Tucker and moved them into our headquarters lease where we had leased but unoccupied space.
Do we have any questions from the subcommittee? Chairman O'Neill. What's your number, Chairman O'Neill?
17. Afternoon, Commissioner.
Good afternoon.
First of all, I want to compliment you and laud you and your department's efforts on the collections of the deficient taxes, the delinquent taxes. $190 million is a tremendously impressive number, and as a percentage reduction of the unpaid, legitimately owed taxes, I think it was a phenomenal effort over the last 2-3 years. I know in the last year and the year before there were new positions asked for, especially in auditing or compliance. and I think most of those were granted to you as other expenses in support of those efforts. And I do know that the $190 million is obviously a statistic that's easy to comprise because it came out of an accounts receivable. But the intangible there is that those are also taxpayers, too, that probably have gotten current would otherwise not be on their current tax obligations as well. So it's a snowballing good effect to our budget. That's a lot of rhetoric leading into this question. My recollection is the new positions we funded and the expenses even with GTE we funded were not more than $2, $3, $4 million as far as budget enhancement in these last couple, 3 years. They have generated $190 million. Given the fact that you have been so incredibly successful in that mission, why would you not continue to expand until we find out that the marginal utility of adding compliance people begins not to pay for itself?
Primarily because we're still trying to vet out what the proper scope is with additional legislation, part of which we're asking for this year. The greater use of technology for electronic filing and required electronic filing will make the need of more people go away. We're also continually going through the department to find out where in one division along the flow of funds we might be creating more work for people to do later. A classic example is in the alcohol registration, license registration business, or in the taxpayer service division. Historically, we had two assessment notices. Then we transferred and created a field notice, which put another notice in the system, and then we went for yet another lien notice that would go out. Every time one of those notices comes out with a different title on it, it's more time that the taxpayer is on the phone, and more times the taxpayer is on the phone with our folks trying to reconcile what they owe as of what date. And so what we're trying to do is take the process apart so that we don't create work in one division that then, for instance, in this case, the compliance division would then have to follow. I'm still convinced we have ways to go to improve our system rather than just throwing more people at it. Last year we asked for 9 contractors in our own operation to pursue taxable vehicle transfers that our backlog had grown to 300,000 vehicles. As I reported earlier, we've now contacted just over 60,000 and generated over $6 million in tax revenue on those alone. So clearly those 9 contractors have paid for themselves. But rather than ask for a commitment of people that haven't proven anything for us yet, we just asked for contractors last year. We also asked for 15 out-of-state auditors, which we couldn't begin hiring until after July 1st of this year. They have now all been hired. But typical corporate audit work, which is what these folks will be doing, obviously takes some time, so they haven't begun yielding any direct results yet. I'm perfectly interested in hiring more people, but I want to get as much efficiency, show what we can do with what we have and what the opportunity still is before we come back and ask for more. Also, some improved work in our systems internally will make some of the work that gets created go away. Like if somebody can't get a refund in less than 2 weeks or 3 weeks, how many times are they actually calling about the same issue before they get a response and get action on their account, as opposed to is it a separate issue they're calling about? That we haven't shrunk that universe yet. So I could put more people out there answering the phone every day, but what I need to do is get them in the refund faster and fix the system so that we don't hold them up, so it generates all those calls.
Can I one follow-up, Mr. Chairman?
Absolutely.
On the out-of-state contractors, that's another situation. I certainly laud your managerial sagacity in doing those. My question is, are we staffed adequately? Because what I hear from constituents, especially business constituents in border communities, most especially, is that if we don't enforce the law very well in our state, which we need to do in our bordering states, it puts our Georgia businesses sometimes at an unnecessary competitive disadvantage. For instance, we see even blatant advertisements in Tennessee that supposedly lead the consumer to believe they can avoid all taxes if they buy over in Tennessee and bring their non-titled, for instance, four-wheel vehicle, which is a large sales tax vehicle, back to Georgia, that they can avoid the Georgia tax. So the businesses in Georgia, which obviously pay our taxes faithfully, are put at a disadvantage. Are you satisfied, especially with the bordering states, that you have adequate personnel and adequate, I guess, policies in place to police these activities where people would seek to deceive our Georgia citizens to get a competitive advantage on our Georgia businesses?
At best, we would have adequate, but we're addressing all of those as we know them. And part of that is driven by, we're working with the Automobile Dealers Association to register all these out-of-state automobile dealers for sales tax as well, because, again, that's what that roam-off operation primarily drives off of is all these taxable out-of-state transactions that then ultimately get registered in Georgia. Separately, we're pursuing the ATV dealers. Another House member recently reported some of those ads to us, and I think we've put him somewhat at ease that we have significant enforcement efforts after people. I'd rather deal with that on the front end than the back end, because folks always do get frustrated when they get the bill after the fact for things like that. But, you know, it's a cultural shift. I mean, with all due respect, in the room where I made the presentation last week, if I ask everybody to raise their hand if they paid their tax and filed their returns with extensions timely, every hand would go up, and I can tell you that I knew at least 10 people in there who couldn't answer that question honestly or wouldn't. It is a cultural problem in this state where people won't meet their obligations. And so as long as that goes on, we're going to have to spend more money to pursue these people. So the more people you give us, and the more technology and the more legislative changes you make to require online filing where we can tie these systems together, both our backbone systems and things like the motor vehicle dealers, and also like what we do with the FAA on tail numbers on airplanes, you'll get results. The collection opportunity is out there, and if we were pursuing the 12% non-compliance I believe is out there, at least out there in sales tax alone, you could reduce overall tax rates and have a far simpler system.
I don't know who was next, but Representative Mosley, I'll go ahead.
Graham, I also would like to commend you for the work you're doing.
Thank you.
One comment from one of my small business folks, you know, below the level that you have to electronic file your sales tax, he indicated that there was a long period of time between cashing the check and his sending the check in. And I was thinking this might be a way that if we could get those checks deposited a little quicker, in other words, he saw that, and if there's some way we could get them in a little quicker, this might help save a few dollars.
Let me tell you what we're doing in that area, if I may. One, last year we took the initiative to contact over 20,000 small businesses that were having to file monthly sales tax returns, and some of them are qualified to file annually or quarterly. Of that 20, only about 5,000 or 6,000 chose to adjust their schedule to a quarterly or annual filing, even though most months are sending a $0 return back to us, which is a burden on them and us to process the paper. Even though they're not required to do it electronically, as long as they have a computer, we can set them up so they still can do it electronically and save each other the burden of chasing the paper in that area too. And again, once we get our legislative package finished this year, there's yet another electronic filing initiative that's built into that we would encourage people to participate in, whether they're required to or not. We've also added to the platform where people can pay by credit card and by electronic check, or ACH, which has not been there before, so that we can get the checks out of there. We've reorganized our whole processing center so that it has a whole new senior management team that's less vertically integrated with more talent at the top, so when somebody's not there, things continue to flow correctly. We think that's going to have a better showing this year in tax season with a better attitude across the department. And yesterday we removed a layer of management from our registration unit, which does sales tax, withholding, alcohol licensing, registration, as an unneeded and ineffective position. And I think we'll then take that position most likely and add 2 more customer service people instead of having that layer of management for somebody who was challenged to get out of their chair.
Representative Black.
Yes. First off, I'm going to add to what Representative Mosley just commented about. I had a constituent that was contacted me, and he was quite upset, to be a matter of fact, about Revenue Department not cashing his check in a reasonable time. It caused him some problem, but I thought that was sort of odd, but Mr. Mosley had run across the same thing. But I wanted to get you to give me a little bit of insight, first off, about the sales tax auditing. Has there been any change in the number of auditors you've had out working sales tax audits?
No, that population is the same. We don't, or we only audit probably less than 1% of any group or industry group that's out there, but we do rotate it by industries. And so there are times where certain industry classes won't see an auditor in their category for some number of years. For instance, in the motor fuel area, I think we have 600 or so licensed motor fuel dealers in the state or distributors in the state, and a legacy that I'm not pleased with. But I couldn't show you we've probably ever visited 400 of those 600. The work has always been at the top bracket or those that have filed amended returns seeking a refund is where most of our work has had to go. That's an area that having more auditors would be helpful, and having more people would help. But that also means the percentage of audits is going to go up, and that's also going to drive some complaints. Unfortunately, while we're not beyond making mistakes and having people mistreat people, and when we find out about that, we do something about it. But unfortunately, when people complain, they are often short on delivering the whole facts to people they complain to. And we're precluded from discussing that unless they give you a power of attorney. But if they do, I want to hear about it. And so if they'll give you a power of attorney, I'll be more than happy to sit down and prove to ourselves and to you that we either did the right thing or we did something wrong. We need to fix it.
One other thing that I'll add is, as a person that's been in business and had to endure a couple of federal income tax audits, and no one enjoys an audit, but one thing that's even worse is being in competition with someone and fear that they're not paying their taxes, and particularly when you're talking about sales tax. And I have had some concerns expressed to me about people that were having to compete with people that they did not feel like that they were paying the sales tax and the tobacco tax as well. I think we maybe addressed the fuel tax here a couple of years ago, but there is some concern.
We have initiatives going on in both of those industry categories right now. Some are, especially in tobacco, where it's historically believed that the contraband or bootleg tobacco coming in the state came from contiguous states. We have, I know one, if not two, significant investigations going on with federal authorities on tobacco coming in here from the Northeast untaxed. So it's a recognized problem. We've had conversations with some of the large tobacco companies that they're not aware of because it's a middleman distributor that's getting in the middle of it. I could make the case all day long for more people and more investigators to pursue some of this stuff. I continually get coaching on not getting overzealous and not wanting too much enforcement authority, but in order to deliver what your constituent wants, which is fairness and equity, we would have to have more people because Georgia has nearly doubled in the last, 10 to 15 years, and the department has many hundred fewer people than we had a few years ago. But we got to make sure they're doing the right thing. I don't want people around if they're not doing the right thing and don't know, aren't trained right. So it's nothing we could address going from one year to the next. It had to be a slow migration to make sure we effectively use people.
Thank you. That answers your question?
Yeah, that answers the question. I got one other comment I'll make, and this is basically to deliver a message to you from a constituent.
I'm sorry?
This will be a message from a constituent, and it's in relation to your efforts in collecting back taxes. I had a constituent that had received a bill for some back taxes for like 5 years and didn't have any other notices until this showed up, and he carried it to his accountant, and his accountant advice to him was it would be cheaper for you to pay that than it will for me to investigate it and fight it and deal with it. And so he paid it. I tried to encourage him. I told him, I said, to not challenge that. You're inviting more of it. I said, if they made an error, they need to know about it. But he said, well, my accountant, I paid him for accounting advice. I'm coming to you for political action. He said, I want you to deliver that message.
When that happens in the future, what I'd ask you to do is call my office, and we'll introduce your constituent to the taxpayer advocate, who will do the research for free to see if someone was mistreated. Because the reason I want to know is usually if it's happened in one place, it could have happened in hundreds, if not thousands, of places. And I'm more than interested to look into it and find out what the outcome of that is. I don't want it to just go away. I mean, their first course of action doesn't necessarily have to be with a professional. We'll tell them at some point where they're better off with professional counsel to try to resolve something, but I would encourage them never to just pay it.
Well, I did too, but
If it's a material amount of money to him, well, I was going to say if it's a material to him, if it's worth opening up and looking at whether or not it's worth filing an amended return, I'm happy to entertain that. I mean, it's perfectly reasonable because every day, whenever we get a complaint, these folks will tell you that it doesn't go unaddressed, and we dig down into it to make sure that it isn't flowing into a whole batch or universe of taxpayers.
Thank you. I think Representative Smith has a question.
Thank you. I'm going to add to the list of thank you. I know when you came on board, you inherited a lot of work, and so you've really addressed it well. And
Thank
I'm
you.
going to tell you, will you get information out to your General Assembly members who our legislative liaisons will be since Bobby Lanahan is retiring? Because he was probably your best PR person for us because we knew we could call. And if we had a constituent call us, then we knew that we could call Mr. Lanahan and he would get us some kind of answer back in a timely manner. So will you continue that?
Yeah, certainly. And he will be in place through this entire General Assembly along with Mac Chandler, who's here today. So it's both of them together. And then from a tax perspective, those behind the scenes and invisible here in the General Assembly will be Ed Maney, who runs the Compliance Division, me, and Laura Butler, our Policy Director, will be part of that too.
It would be helpful, I'm sure, to the other members
Okay.
to know our contact people and what their role would be.
And we'll be present in every Ways and Means Committee, every Motor Vehicle Committee meeting, and other DOT regulatory committee where we have a crossover role when that happens. I will tell you that some of what we have found in the motor vehicle unit since bringing it over is certainly room for future improvement. In previous years, they went to a delayed rotation of renewing tags, which was going to save money from buying new inventory. But what they neglected to tell anybody was that they had bought over 2 million other tags that are sitting in a warehouse in Conyers that I now have to figure out a way to utilize because over time people's taste and the change in tag becomes warranted. And so we don't want to just purge that inventory. We're going to try to get it on the street and use it. We also found I think it was 800 computer or printer rebuild kits that go in the counties for printing title registrations. That's antiquated technology that needs to be replaced because we're having to service 159 counties with 2 technicians and 2 trucks to do that. Likewise, in motor vehicle here in Atlanta, wherever the money was being spent before, they're still doing backup record keeping with microfiche. It's just horrible technology. This costs more money, and so that's where we want to see the platform go to take cost out of the system.
Thank you. I have one more follow-up on that, and it goes to improve customer service, and I'm so happy to see that is a message you want to get out to us and to the general public. Will there be a contact person for CPAs and accountants when one of their clients might come back and say, why was this deduction not allowed, and that type of thing? In times past, I think there was a way for these tax preparers to get immediate help, or not immediate, but timely help.
Well, the problem in the past was it was so decentralized they could get different answers depending on who they called. That's why we formed a centralized tax policy group, which is run by Laura Butler, so that any broad-based initiative comes that way. We have different advisory groups too. One is for local governments, the ACCG and GMA. We have one with small practitioner CPAs and small businesses, and we have a large corporate tax advisory panel too. Those are all conduits, and maybe if we do a follow-on press release on that to notify who those coordinating people are, so they can both reach out to us directly or to a member participating on one of those advisory panels, and also get on the rotation. I'm a firm believer in term limits, so nobody gets on one of those advisory panels and doesn't have to rotate off. One last thing I'd like to follow back on a question about collection and compliance. One of the backlogs of work that we found a little over a year ago in the department were over 30 million in unclaimed refunds, where somebody in the department just decided that we didn't need to tell anybody they needed to ask for it, they wanted it back. And so we went on an aggressive campaign to let people know that we had their refund from previous years, and whether they wanted to check or to apply it to a current year's tax obligation. And some people in this room actually benefited from that refund exercise. So just so you know, I'm not making it up.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions for you. There may be more questions from the subcommittee. I want to get more into this 269 through 273, this movement of this money, tax relief grant money. But first of all, I want to ask you, in the joint committee meetings last week, somebody had asked you about car rebates when somebody buys a new car. And that's when you get a discount from a dealer, and sometimes there's a manufacturer discount. I don't know, but somewhere in there they might have a $2,000 rebate or something like that, which the consumer. Now, I don't believe the consumer actually ever sees that. That really is just taken off the price of the car as if it were a discount. And you had indicated that, and the answer is that that is treated as a rebate or money coming to the consumer. But you had said though. Also, that if we didn't have that, I think the person who asked you about that asked about changing that, and you said would have a significant fiscal impact, I believe. My question, and I thought about that, but that's not something that's guaranteed by the manual. We don't. I mean, tomorrow, I know that the market's not going to cause it to happen tomorrow, but tomorrow or next month, those rebates could disappear anyway. That would have the same significant impact on revenue. So I'd just like for you to answer or to comment on why that would. I mean, I know how it would have that, but why do you think that there's rebates since the consumer never actually gets that? Why should that be treated as income to the consumer?
From a theoretical standpoint, or from the legal standpoint? From the legal standpoint, it's taxable in Georgia.
If we were to change that,
well, you'd also have to pick up the computer industry too, for all the rebates that they issue. In the way that they structure that. Now, that's part of why I get to it'd be a material amount of money. Now, if they just change the sale price, the for-sale price at X amount of money, then the sales tax would be what it is. Ed Maney's here, and he could probably give you a better tax practitioner's response to that.
I'm Ed Maney. I'm Director of the Compliance Division. Representative Parsons, this rebate is a manufacturer's rebate that actually does get figured into the price. In other words, you have the price of the vehicle, say it's a $20,000 vehicle. That rebate is shown, as I understand it, as a payment, just as if the consumer was making the $18,000 payment and the manufacturer is making a $2,000 payment. And we've always taxed manufacturers' coupons or incentives, but not discounts. So if it was a dealer discount, it would be deductible. As manufacturers, as Commissioner Graham has said, this crosses all of the major industries. I mean, I guess you could pass something just for automobiles only. But I think that some others you'd have to be very careful because these rebates appear across all of our industries, and it's possible others may want the same kind of treatment. And I think we're consistent with other states. There's most states, and I say most states, manufacturers' rebates are considered payments from manufacturers, coupons from manufacturers. It's considered a form of payment that comes into the dealer, just like it's an exchange of consideration. Okay. If it comes otherwise from the dealer, we allow the discount.
Well, I appreciate that. It seemed like the question from and I don't even remember who asked it in the joint hearings we had last week. To me, it's a good question. I do know, and I don't know much about that industry. I really don't. But I believe that the auto manufacturers get, or not the manufacturers, but the dealers get, they get funds back from the manufacturer based on the amount of cars they sell anyway. I mean, so to me, I don't see I don't see there's that much difference between that and the rebate, especially since the customer never sees. I don't think the customer actually gets a check cut to them or anything. I don't think
it's far more complicated than it has to be. Just like if you could get rid of some or all the 85 sales tax exemptions, our costs of enforcement and audits and amended returns would be far less than it is today.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate the explanation. I'd also like to ask you about, you mentioned business audits. I'm wondering about audits of individuals. Do you all only, I'll ask you, do you only audit individuals if there is an IRS audit, or is there a process that you choose people to audit for state taxes?
There's a process. Some of it is for cause, for lack of action or inaction on behalf of taxpayers. Historically, some audits would only be driven by our sharing information agreements with the IRS. But what we've found in recent years is that many people aren't filing federally or locally, statewide, and which made it far more difficult to uncover that there were problems there. We have begun doing more W-2 matching, which makes it far more difficult to avoid that, and our sharing agreements require that we let the other jurisdictions know. So the answer to the question is yes, there are standards, but no one should be getting picked on. If somebody feels like that they are, then I would want to know about it so I can find out there's a problem in the system. But I've never had that complaint since I've been in the department.
Okay, you may get calls.
Well, that's fine. I mean, if there's a problem, I want to look into it and I want to know.
And finally, or maybe not finally, but I also want to ask you, and I know you and I you gave me some information on this earlier, but I want to make sure for myself and for the committee members that I understand. In the governor's document on page 49, these items 269 through 273 related to the tax relief grants. There's about $20 million here that we've said, or the document, the governor has recommended that we say yes to, that this money will be redirected from the tax relief grant for timely processing to ensure timely and accurate processing of tax returns. I think that amounts to about $20 million. First of all, there's then down on 274, we're redirecting $7.5 million of that back to your agency, your department. My first question is, what has happened to the rest of that? Where's the rest of that money?
Can you tell me again what page you're on? Because my 49 says Board of Education.
49 of the governor's document for the excuse me, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. It's 49 of the tracking sheet.
Thank you.
Page 100. Okay, page 100 of the governor's document for the 06 budget. Well, 269 through, well, here again, I'm looking at the tracking document.
Your question.
The guesses there where the governor's recommending we move that money, redirect it from the.
Your question is, there's 10 there, but there's 20 was the surplus, and where's the other 10?
Yeah.
I have no idea. I'm not trying to be flippant. I honestly don't.
Okay. Well, it would all appear that it's related to. Looking at those items, it appears it's related to the tax department. But then.
No, only 10 of it. Either 9 or 10 of it was all it was recommended back to us.
All right.
And over $7 million of that, to my recollection, is all driven by GTA charges.
Okay. Well, now the explanation in here is basically just to ensure timely and accurate processing of tax returns. And I know that from communication you've given me that relates to GTA charges, I believe. Is that correct?
The overwhelming majority of that is correct, yes.
The majority of it is.
But there are some answer items in there, like litigation expense, that we have historically not had much of, but budgeted to us. But we spent over $800,000 with one railroad litigation. We spent over $300,000 or $400,000 last year with the MCI WorldCom settlement, because while we turned off some litigation by settling with people we didn't otherwise want to settle with. We felt those were two important ones, and the one with the MCI WorldCom settlement, we ultimately received $39.7 million, which went back into the state treasury, not the department.
Okay, so for these things, it would appear that I would have an argument with the not the budget office, but the governor's OPB, because these just don't. I mean, if a taxpayer, one of our taxpayers would look at this document, they have no idea. I mean, we got these huge amounts of money that are being redirected, but there's nothing to explain to them what it's being spent for. But then also, this is the 06 amended budget, and I'm wondering, that's an awful lot of money to spend between now and the end of this fiscal year.
We can provide to each of you a reconciliation of the money that we're asking for back in the department. We'll do that in writing on our letterhead. That shows some of that is for bills that went unpaid last year. Some that was worked out with OPB. Some of it is that same expense that's going to hit this year, or that we're experiencing this year. And so we'll give you the reconciliation of that, and we should be able to provide that by Friday of this week.
Yeah,
and we'll do it in writing. So for each of these categories.
I'm sorry, we're going to be voting out our final recommendation of the full committee, so I'd like to see that.
Okay, would you make sure that each member gets it, not just the subcommittee chairman? Thank you.
Okay. I would appreciate that. It's here again, it is, and these are the governor's recommendations, and it was the governor who not that long ago, it seemed as if, maybe I can't quote him on it, but it was my impression that he may even do away with this amended process, and now all of a sudden this department and others, there's fairly large amounts of money that have been kicked in for the last 6 months of the fiscal year.
Back when the department had what was referred to as modernization money, the governor didn't understand that well. I didn't understand it well. He asked me to come back to him starting 2 years ago to determine what the appropriate funding level for the department is in a more transparent fashion, and that's what we're attempting to do, is make that migration so that we also can pay our GTA funding charges as well. So we'll give you that reconciliation. And I would expect next year to be a lot cleaner than having to go through this migration.
Okay. Do we have any other questions from the subcommittee? You do? Okay, Representative Bly.
Paid unpaid bills from last year. I thought we had a balanced budget portion of the Constitution. But you want to expound on that a little bit?
I thought we did too, but we didn't have the money to pay the GTA bills. They did a one-time credit to our bill that they thought would cover our expected obligations for the balance of the year. And that wasn't enough. They didn't change the rate. They just did a one-time credit. And then the balance was credited from a different source. JD, you want to take that?
I guess what really our situation is that when we got towards the end of the fiscal year, we had a situation where we needed to make sure that all of our outside sources that were requiring funds from us were paid. And our relationship with GTA allowed us the opportunity to carry over a balance into the new fiscal year so we can make sure that we met all our obligations to the outside contractors. So we kind of, lack of a better term, robbed Peter to pay Paul in that scenario, right?
Okay, we have your question answered, Representative Bly.
Yeah.
Thank you. And, Mr. Chairman, I apologize for coming in late at another meeting I need to sit at. Commissioner, if in the 06, is the department asking for additional funds? That's the part I think I missed.
Yes.
And what's the amount of funds that you are asking for? Just a rounded dollar amount?
$11.5 million.
$11.5 million.
Yes.
Okay. And then to go back to the chairman's comment, it shows it's an agency net down there on Section 39, Revenue Department, on the tracking documents, agency net of $10,286,504 that they're taking away. So it is a little odd that.
Yeah, the difference is we finished last year with a $20 million surplus in the HTRG funding, which again was created by curtailing the creation of special tax districts. We're asking for 11.5 of that. The 10 that's being taken away is the difference in the HTRG funding of 20.
Okay, I just wanted to follow up with.
Yeah, it's this plus the 10's being taken away comes to what the HTRG surplus was.
But you won't get the commissioners. You don't know where the 10's going anyway.
No, I don't know. I wasn't part of those discussions. As they say, I have my own lunch to eat.
All right, thank you, Representative Scheid. Do we have any further questions from the subcommittee?
It's being reported to me that 10's going back to Treasury.
I knew that.
Okay. Is it getting reappropriated somewhere else? All right. But it's not staying for reserve or restricted funds for us.
Mr. Commissioner, I forgot to ask. The estate tax at the federal level, as you know, is being phased out. It reminded me when I saw my good friend Representative Parrish. He asked me about that, and I didn't have a very good answer. Are we collecting all we can hope to collect in Georgia until the feds have completely, or not completely, but for practical purposes done away with it? Or are we doing anything differently than we used to use the state exemption as the amount that Georgia received? Is that still the modus operandi?
That's correct. If we change the way we're currently operating, it would be a tax increase to anybody who had to pay it.
So we actually still are collecting some death taxes in Georgia, but you expect that to continue?
I think it phases out this year, doesn't it?
It's out. It's gone.
Okay. So it's just people filing a return now, but any estate that's settled from this point forward wouldn't be obligated to pay it. Is that fair?
That's correct.
Okay.
I don't think there are any further questions. I did want to say I want to thank you for coming, answering our questions. We appreciate that. We appreciate the job that you all do and the increasing your aggressiveness, I guess, in collecting taxes. We appreciate that because that's what runs the state. We have to have those. But I would also say, as legislators, we're interested in saving our taxpayers' money and giving as much money back to them as we can. So I would ask you, before you get that information to me that you're going to on Friday, if you could identify any places in here in this 06 amended budget, and we'll ask you the same thing for 07, if you can identify any places where you could offer up some cuts for these recommendations, we would appreciate that.
Well, I'll just tell you that was extracted out of me in the 3 budget meetings I had with the governor. But what isn't there, and where we can get money out of the platform, is moving to more electronic filing, electronic refunds, and modernization, if you will, of some of our technology. That will reduce the number of people we have to chase this thing, especially the seasonal and contract workers that we use. That is the most productive way to take money out of the platform. We don't let people travel for more than 3 days at a time anymore. Like I said, we've renegotiated all our leases or moved or closed them. So there's more opportunity for us to go collect. One of the philosophies in the department when I got there was, if you get us $5 million in appropriated money, we'll collect 50. I think we can make the case now that we've collected somewhere in the magnitude of $240 million, and the only new money we really have gotten up to now is the 9 contractors for Rome and the 15 out-of-state auditors who are just now starting to work. The rest of that's just recurring money, other than, I think, as Chairman O'Neill noted, $2 or $3 million that was added to the budget last year.
Well, I appreciate it, and appreciate you coming today.
Sure.
And thank you very much.
Who is your committee secretary?
That's Representative Hurd.
Well, on the staff, staff assistant. Whoever that is, if they'll make sure to let me know if they don't get the reconciliation by Friday, I'd like to personally engage in that.
My secretary is...
Okay. Could you just give her the note that if she doesn't see that from us on Friday, that somebody let me know? I would appreciate it. Okay.
Thank you very much. Next, we have, I'm sorry to run a little bit late, but next we have Banks and Banking. Anybody here from the, not Banks and Banking, but the Banking and Finance Department.
Good afternoon.
Thank you. If you would, if you would introduce yourself to us and tell us what department you're from, which we know that, but tell us what
Sure.
the mission of your, the mission of the department is and what you do for the citizens of the state.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. My name is Rob Braswell. I'm the, as of December 1st, 2005, the new Commissioner of the Department of Banking and Finance. With me I have David Hancock. He's our Deputy Commissioner for Administration and handles all our budget matters. The handout that was just passed out kind of goes through and kind of gives you an overview of where the department is and what its mission. As you'll see there on page 2, basically the overall mission of the department basically is to ensure the integrity of the financial industry in Georgia and to protect its citizens by ensuring that integrity in the system. If you'll turn over to page 3 of the handout, you'll see the programs that we supervise there and the breakout of the largest concentration of our budget and the revenues. You'll see the financial industry supervision and the mortgage supervision program represent the largest concentration of our budget revenues and budget resources, representing approximately 60% and 15.8% respectively of the department's total budget resources. Just to give you a little background, all of our supervised entities pay either annual assessment fees, application fees, licensing fees, in support of the department's operations. As reflected on page 4 of the handout, the department continues to reflect total revenues that substantially exceed our budget appropriations. Last year, 2005, revenues of approximately $20.7 million compared to a budget of $10.2 million. Over the past 5 years, the department's generated revenues of approximately $38.5 million in excess of the appropriated budget. On pages 5 and 6 of the handout reflects the significant growth in our industry and the institutions that we regulate over the past 5 years. The acquisition of National Commerce Bank by SunTrust during this past year will also likely result in additional assets under our supervision of about $25 billion that would be added to the bottom line number that you see now as of 9/30. I want to say the department is extremely appreciative of the additional budget appropriations that were recommended by the governor last year and approved by the legislature. It allowed us to address a short decrease or a very tight staffing situation that we had. The department has been actively hiring examiners. We were appropriated for 11 new positions. We have hired 8 and are continuing to in the hiring process. We've had some turnover during that same time, so we have more than 8 new people. It's just a net number of 8 additional ones at this time. The department remains committed to maintaining an efficient and risk-focused operations in terms of exam staffing, and we have definitely prioritized what we do to try to maximize our resources. As you'll see, the department continues to reflect a substantial volume of new bank applications in the state of Georgia. Last year, our state was 3rd regarding the number of new banks that came online. We had, it was a record number, tied for a record number for the state of Georgia. We had 13 new banks open last year. We have 11 banks that have currently been approved to open by the department but have not yet opened. And we have 12 institutions that are in the pipeline. We have received their applications and are going through the review process as we speak, as well as there have been additional groups that have come to us and told us they are planning to file. So you can gather from that, the industry remains a very dynamic and a very growing industry here in Georgia. Regarding the amended 2006 budget, you'll see that we are asking to replace 5 department vehicles. We currently have 4 vehicles that have their mileage is in excess of 140,000 miles. By June 30th of this year, we'll have an additional 4 vehicles that are in excess of 140,000 miles. So we have 8 cars that have extensive mileage. 1 vehicle currently has over 190,000 miles. And so first and foremost, we're asking to replace them for a safety issue and reliability issue for our examiners that are having to travel to the banks throughout the state, as well as it also impacts morale and time from the cars breaking down and things of that nature, as well as repair cost. We appreciate your consideration of our budget requests, and we also appreciate your continued support throughout the year, and be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Do we have any questions from the subcommittee? Representative Parrish, you have a number there on that? 9.
On page 4 of your handout there, if I'm looking at this right, on the revenue is like $21 million, and your appropriation was roughly $11 million, and that revenue is generated from the fees that you charge the institutions. Is that not correct?
That's correct.
So it would almost be fair to say that the banking department is a profit center for the state to the tune of about $10 million.
That's correct.
Or another way to say it would, we're charging the banks $10 million more than we need to.
Well, in the past years, we have consistently reduced our assessment fees to the banks approximately, I believe, 25%. 15 to 25% reduction, as well as you have to remember some of the revenues are not coming from the banks and credit unions, but a substantial portion of that comes from our mortgage division. Approximately a little over $7 million, I believe, comes from the mortgage division.
But you regulate those also, do you not?
Yes, yes.
So what I'm saying is we need more banking departments because you guys are generating a pretty good profit for us over there, I guess.
$38.5 million over the last 5 years. That's right.
Thank you. Any other questions? Representative Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and nice to meet you.
Thank you.
Welcome aboard.
Thank you very much.
Just hang on, because we're trying. I've just noticed through the years how much our mortgage areas have grown.
Mm-hmm.
If you could help explain to a layman, what does that do to y'all? Can you keep up with this growth? Because it's more than 2/3 in numbers compared to everything else. How does that work? How do y'all regulate the mortgage industry?
Right, that's a good question. I came over, and in fact, that's where I directly have come from. I supervised the mortgage division the last 2.5 years. And so when I came over to that division in October and August of 2003, the first thing we did was prioritize who we examined because we have so many. We cannot obviously go into each and every one on a timely basis. And you may know Georgia's #1 in mortgage fraud, just due to primarily the economy and as well as many other factors. And so we adopted a risk-focused exam and based our examination program strictly on our level of suspicious activity that has been reported to an institution, the number of complaints received by consumers regarding that institution. Many times we get complaints or referrals from ex-workers and that sort of thing. And so we have a priority list based on our reports about those entities, and those are the ones that we're targeting. And so, and we have also, out of the 11 additional examiner positions that we received last year, 3 of those were devoted to the mortgage division to try to shore up that division somewhat.
Thank you. I was just going to comment on the numbers. The total in 05, as of 9/30/05, was 4,628, and the mortgage brokers and lenders of that number is 3,326. So
that's right.
That's almost, I don't want to say unmanageable, but I would. So you're going to continue these efforts just to ensure fairness.
Exactly, and also we are working very closely. I'm on a working group with the commissioners from all throughout the nation. We're working on a centralized database in which currently when a licensee wants to be licensed or entity wants to be licensed in 50 states, they have to apply 50 times and do everything 50 times over. And so we're looking at one centralized database where that information is sent there. They do the background checks, they do the financial checks, and then send that information out to the respective states to determine yes or no whether to license them or not. But it also will be a tracking mechanism. Many times we have, since we've adopted the risk-focused exam, the number of administrative actions has increased dramatically, and we have expelled many people from the industry that we considered fraudsters, as well as reported them to various law enforcement agencies. But what happens many times is they will flee the state of Georgia and go across the border to another state, and vice versa. And so that's why the states are now getting together to try to address the problem uniformly.
And to be able to be in this business, the licensing process, are there certain criteria to meet, or can just...
There are. There's certain financial requirements, as well as certain experience requirements and education requirements, as well as the monetary fee. Okay. But, we do background checks and things of that nature.
All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Representative Stride.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner, I also want to congratulate you on your new position.
Thank you.
At last session, I introduced a resolution to require the department education requirements for mortgage brokers. Mm-hmm. And I understand that the department has done that. What's the number of hours that mortgage brokers have to have education now?
That's correct. 12 hours per year.
12 hours.
And we did that in conjunction with the Georgia Association of Mortgage Brokers. We sat down with their representatives and as well as looked at what other states were applying. And it really ranges considerably from other states, but usually 8 was the minimum, and some states had a 2-year, 20-hour type thing. But this is an annual 12 hours.
Well, I wanted to thank you for that and applaud the department for that. I think that'll make a significant difference in even your fraud issues that come up, just so folks know they're not getting into the...
That's right. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We have a question from Representative Hurd.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner, I'm looking at the document that tracks the 04, 05, and 06 expenditures. It's page 292 in the 07 budget. I don't know if you have that with you or not.
Okay, I may not.
But I will try to elaborate. There's 2 categories of which there's significant increases from 04, 05 to 06. In telecommunications, it ran $1,500,000 04, $1,200,000 in 05, and now it's jumped to $3,900,000 in 06, and to jump to $4,500,000 in 07. Could I get just a bit of explanation explaining why that tremendous jump?
Okay, regarding telecommunications?
Telecommunications, yes.
I'm showing telecommunications in 04, 113,560. Are you looking at
I'm sorry.
must be a different agency.
He's in revenue.
Okay. I was going to say, that's half our budget. I was a little surprised by those numbers myself.
Don't tell him. I'm sorry.
That's okay. That's okay.
Yes, I have a question.
No.
All right, yeah, and I'd like to try to keep it to the 06 budget at this time, too, if we could. So. Representative Maxwell's got a question.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner, and
Sure.
again, congratulations on the new position. We mentioned, you mentioned about the fraud in the mortgages, trying to prevent some fraud there. What about Georgia's also like the #1 state for bankruptcies? Are we doing anything as far as through the education? I'm not familiar with Representative Shive's bill, but I keep hearing all these interest-only loans and all the other things that come up in Georgia that, and we just dealt with this in another committee about people paying interest-only for so long, they're paying down principal. Are we looking at anything through banks and banking about trying to take care of any problems we're having with especially through our mortgages, of people, continually, the bankruptcy numbers rising?
Right. Well, we are trying to increase the consumer outreach. We have just hired a young woman that's also an attorney. That 20% of her job will be consumer outreach type things to address all sorts of issues, but bankruptcies, foreclosures, just to educate them in the process. We've got certain areas where that seems to be more prevalent than others, and that is one of her top priorities. She just came on board last Monday, I believe it was, but to address that.
Follow-up. as we look at the mortgage lenders, do we go back and look and see if they are actually qualifying people properly for the mortgages they're getting? Is that any type of purview here agency?
We do. We primarily, because of the risk focus exam, we're finding most of the fraud is with the mortgage brokers as opposed to the mortgage lenders. And so most of our efforts are directed toward the mortgage brokers. But we do ensure that, we look at each file, not each and every file, but we do take a strong sampling of files and to look at that. And we have discussed with our banks to determine if any of our banks and credit unions are getting into what we call the exotic type mortgages, the interest-only mortgages, or the pick-a-payment type mortgage. And they are not getting into that very much at all. The ones that are doing it to the wealthier clients, which those type instruments were really geared for. Now, unfortunately, some of the mortgage brokers are the ones that are heavily into the exotic mortgages, and they're selling those into the secondary market. There's a big appetite for anything in the secondary market.
Thank you, sir.
Mm-hmm. Representative Smith has a question.
Thank you. One last question.
Sure.
This has been very educational, and I appreciate
thank
the insight. Who regulates payday lenders? Where is that? As we think we outlawed it, but did we?
Right. We
how
did,
do we know?
basically. We don't have that. They're not under our jurisdiction.
Where would they?
If that,
and
because
it's illegal, I guess. I'm trying to understand that myself. How do we know if that reemerges somewhere else? Is where I'm headed, I guess.
I would assume complaints would either go to we have a Consumer Affairs Division, and they may receive those complaints, or the Governor's Office, the Consumer Affairs, may receive complaints if they're still in business.
But y'all wouldn't regulate or investigate because it theoretically doesn't exist, right?
That's right. It doesn't fall under our purview.
Okay.
It's under insurance.
Insurance,
All right.
okay.
Said insurance.
Okay.
Thank you. Didn't know.
And one last thing I meant to mention also regarding mortgage fraud. One of the first things we also did was to have every examiner that qualified with the years of experience become certified fraud examiners. So they have kind of gotten a specialty in that field because it was so prevalent. So we have currently, I believe, 8 certified fraud examiners.
Thank you. Welcome aboard again.
Thank you.
Representative Hurd has a question.
Just to follow up on Chairman Smith's question on payday lending, and there's other parallel businesses such as automobile dealers where they do lending within the dealership and furniture, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
Are those lending operations monitored at all?
They're not by the
Not by
Department
you.
of Banking. That's right. And I can't answer the other. I don't know. But not by the Department of Banking. They don't fall under our jurisdiction.
I don't see any other questions. I believe that's it. Thank you very much for coming today. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Look forward to seeing you the next time. Now we have the State Accounting Office. Thank you for coming today. I appreciate you coming on late notice because I didn't have you included in the hearings because it's so new. So, if you'd introduce yourself to us and tell us about the mission of the State Accounting Office and then the budget.
I'm Lynn Valenga. I'm a State Accounting Officer. State Accounting Office was created last July 1st through House Bill 293, and it's a new office for the state of Georgia. I'm giving you a couple of handouts. One gives you a little bit of detail of who the State Accounting Office is, and one that just is a summary of some of the objectives and new projects we're working on and some of the benefits and costs to the state. Just to give you a little background that you may be familiar with, but prior to the creation of the State Accounting Office, there was no single agency responsible for accounting functions in the state. The Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, which is the external financial report audited by the State Department of Audits and Accounts, was also prepared by the State Audit, which is a conflict of their independence requirements. So every year the state of Georgia had a qualification because of the independence. Agencies, of course, had their focus on their business and the financial requirements that they had to meet. We had the budget office focus on budget, but there was no central focus on state-level issues. The payroll system was run by, and the accounting system, or financial system, whichever you prefer to call it, was run by the IT office, which is the Georgia Technology Authority. So we're one of those back office operations, don't have a lot of constituency, but an important part of doing business, and doing business the best way we can in the state of Georgia. So with our creation, the legislation charged us with establishing statewide accounting policies and procedures, operating the state's payroll and HR systems and the statewide accounting systems, preparing the state's financial report and any interim reporting. We've also been charged with improving internal controls and improving the efficiency and the collection of accounts receivable and improving cash management practices. We've are currently in the process of upgrading the accounting system. This was a project that was begun before I started, but we were trying to complete that by the end of this fiscal year. We've also been charged by the Commission for New Georgia to implement the initiatives for streamlined banking and accounts receivable management, and to meet some of the requirements of improving the efficiency of state government. We've recommended some investments in infrastructure for state accounting operations to improve accountability. The two-page handout I gave you is a summary of some of the major initiatives that our office is undertaking. Before I go into that, I guess I should brag about my office just a little bit. When I came to the state, we're 2 years behind in issuing our state financial reports. We had 93 that was still trying to be completed, 94 that was, when I started, 6 months behind, 9 months behind. It ended up being a year. So in the last year, our office has issued a record 3 financial reports in 1 year. We caught up on, we made some hard decisions on getting the 03 report completed. We had to have some qualifications and disclaimers in the report because of some problems with the systems that have been in the news. We got the financial report for 04 done at the end of July, mid-July. Of course, 12 months, that's nothing to brag about, but to get it done was quite an accomplishment. We got that to the bond rating agencies in time to issue the state's debt. And then, for the first time ever in Georgia's history, we issued the 2005 report, and I hope you received a copy of that. In January, the printed copy, but we had this on the internet by the end of the 6-month period, which is the standard for governments. And we, of course, want to improve on that, but this was a major accomplishment, a change in audit processes and a cooperative effort with the Department of Audits. And for the first year, we also were able to remove the qualification from the financial statements for independence. We still have some additional issues we're working on to improve the financial reporting of the state, but this has been a major accomplishment for the whole state because it took a cooperative effort from all the departments, the auditors, and of course some direction and encouragement from the governor helped a lot. But some of the areas, our budget's new, and so we don't have a lot of history. When we requested our initial budget, they were short funding us a little bit because they figured it would take us a little bit of time to get started. The majority of the funding for our office was transferred from the Georgia Technology Authority, some from audits from the people who prepared financial statements. But there were functions that no one ever really did that required additional funding. And so one of the increases for personal services is to get the staffing level up to the original anticipated staffing levels of the office. The other staffing increases are for areas related to the Commission for New Georgia Studies. The two major areas that we're focusing on for Commission for New Georgia is streamlined banking. And we took, if you go to the second page, it shows you some of the, I tried to do a cost-benefit analysis of what the state gains from implementing these initiatives. streamlined banking was identified by the Commission of New Georgia to have savings anywhere from, over a 5-year period, anywhere from $12 to $24 million. Now, in most of the projections we've done in benefits, we've used the lower one, but I've thrown the higher one in there just so you have that information. Improving accounts receivable, they estimated there were approximately $2.3 billion in delinquent receivables. Now, there's some questions as to how valid that number is. And so in projecting savings, we tried to be very conservative to say if 5% were collected, and the interest earnings on that 5%, that's what the savings represents there. So we're not even counting the cash flow in trying to project the benefit to the state. And we tried to be conservative on that, but if we improve that process, the total savings would be between $16 and $32 million. But it will take an investment. To change the banking processes is a major change in business processes for the state. And we need to invest in some software and implementation of software. We use PeopleSoft as a software product for accounting. They have cash management software that we did not have license rights to, and we had to buy that. And so some of those costs and implementation costs are the major cost initiatives. And then we have some ongoing staffing costs because there will be transfer functionality into our office for managing those new processes. And then the receivables, we have accounts receivable, but we do not have the billing process implemented in the system. To provide a statewide billing option, that was the investment in accounts receivable. We also believe it would be wise to study a statewide management of delinquent accounts and determining what the most effective way to do that. We believe a shared service model where once accounts become delinquent, we would transfer those to a collection agency or a collection process that could be managed centrally so every agency of the state does not have to learn how and have all the administrative cost of administering that. We believe there should be some economies of scale in administering that on a single time. We also have requested funding for improved reporting tools that the state could benefit greatly on. There was a demonstration to the budget office on some of these data warehouse functionality, and it would be of great benefit for the state agencies as well as for legislative and governor's budget offices to provide information, make information very accessible to the managers and decision makers of the state. I'd be happy to answer any questions if that's, hopefully that's giving you a quick overview of who we are.
I appreciate it. Do we have Representative Smith?
John and I were talking. Let John do it.
Okay.
Thank you for the presentation. I did have one question related to the collection of delinquent accounts. Just curious as to what agencies, where those delinquent accounts are and what volume they are.
I apologize I didn't bring the detail, but there was a large number in the Department of Community Health related to the advance payments with their system problems they had 3 years ago. And of course the Tax Commission collects their own delinquent accounts, but those are included in the study. But we would not take that over from the Tax Commission, or excuse me, the Revenue Department. I apologize, I have some bad language in my back of my brain. Same business, but different names. But there were just miscellaneous ones. There are some federal revenues that are not collected on a timely basis. Those I don't believe should have been included in what. You're not going to have those go delinquent for very long. It's timing and collecting those on a more timely basis. Those would very rarely get to a 180-day delinquency that you go send to a collection agency. But if you don't collect them on a timely basis, there is always lost revenue from interest earnings, and we're floating the federal government generally on an ongoing basis, but that should be very short periods of time as opposed to long periods of time. You'll have miscellaneous collections in transportation for damage to state property, Those are the ones I can remember off the top of my head. If you want more detail, I could get that to you.
Any other questions from the subcommittee? Any questions? I guess that covers it. It's your benefit to be last on the list today. We're questioning that. Thank you so much for coming. We appreciate your work. Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chair, we do hearings today, tomorrow,
Yeah.
Thursday, and then we come back Friday.
And I appreciate y'all being here today.